why you should care about what happens to Bitcoin and what can we learn from Mt. Gox. So, you know, my name is Gavin Mehl. Back when we first started this channel, it was really directed towards personal growth, health, and development. And now we're at a point in human history where the entire financial system and our own personal growth and development overall is on the line. You know, if you really look closely, there's a new, anybody could talk about this. The central banks are talking about rolling out what's called a central bank digital currency. There's something called Fed now. It's been, it's mainstream news now that they want to push this forward. And a system like that, what it does is it takes away power from us, the people, by causing everything to be tracked and everything to be accountable to the government. Now, we can pray and hope that they follow the law and make things go through Congress in the United States before doing anything, because that's what's required. They are required to do that first. Take it to Congress, bring a bill, let it pass, get it signed off by the House and the Senate and the President before anything passes. Let's pray that they do that so we have notice. However, let's say that they don't and they bypass all that. Well, that's why Bitcoin, in this case, is at its urgent. One of the reasons it's at an urgent, why you should really care about what happens with it, because Bitcoin takes away power. It is at the heart of everything that the Fed now system doesn't want. So by the time the powers to be realized what it was, because it's so hard to figure out and understand Bitcoin, it was too late to destroy it. So all that could be done was instead they could build a system to masquerade and make it look like Bitcoin and stop the scaling of it. So it only did 1 megabyte block, which is a very small amount of transactions, and make it very expensive, and change its direction from being peer-to-peer cash, and then they'd call it digital gold. HODL, don't use it. Make it expensive. Make sure you keep it on your wallets, and then remove the digital signatures on the chain. Now, why is that important? Well, because tying in Mt. Gox. Mt. Gox was this one of the first exchanges on Bitcoin. I think around 2013. It started by Jed McCaleb. Remember that name, Jed McCaleb. So what happened with Mt. Gox is the system ended up as a centralized. It had centralized power of all these people's Bitcoins with no accountability. So we would deposit Bitcoin onto the exchange, and there would be no accounting for where it would go, and no auditability for what would happen to the Bitcoins. It completely centralized the power. Then some people got a wrong idea, and everything went down and collapsed. So Mt. Gox ended up being one of the largest heists and scams, of all time. Now, what can we learn from that? Well, by having a ledger, by having Bitcoin, the original Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, what it does is it creates an accounting system, an actual public ledger for every single transaction on a public blockchain forever throughout time. So we know exactly where the receipt of every single transaction is going. We have accountability of it. Now, on the flip side, the version that has been created, masquerading as Bitcoin, called BTC, what the difference is they actually took away the digital signatures. It's called SegWit back in 2017. And by taking away the digital signatures, we no longer have a way to track every single transaction because there's no longer accountability on the ledger. So it's not, and why should you care? Because look, if we don't have another way to transact, let's say, come on, there's inflation everywhere. We got to be honest. There's no question about that. Even people who, I'm not political, but I'm talking about just there's inflation. So we have to have a way to transact. Now, if it were 150 years ago, maybe we could use gold and silver. How are we going to transact in gold and silver, even though it's the only lawful currency in the United States, at great distances, other than in person? That's going to be tough, So while it makes sense for local communities, how are we going to transact at distances past that? Well, that's where the people get the opportunity to choose. There's a lot of confusion out there on all these other, what they call alt coins, alt chains, other systems. But let's tie this all back together to Mt. Gox and what we can learn from this and how this entire, master plan has fit together. Because you got a giant David versus Goliath situation going on right now. And you have to pick a side. Really do. You have to pick a side, whether you're on David's side or Goliath's side. All right? Because David's side is just a little nobody, small, original Bitcoin, peer-to-peer cash. It's not the biggest well-known thing in the world. It's not the most expensive thing. It's not the highest price. It's actually very low. It's just called Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, the original Bitcoin from 2009. Otherwise, you've got all these other alt chains like XRP, which is off Ripple, Stellar, BTC, Ethereum, and others, for the reason they believe that Bitcoin couldn't function properly. Now, it's funny that we bring up the name Stellar, Ripple, XRP. For some reason, we have a short memory. And even though Mt. Gox wasn't that long ago, I mean, if people like me remember what happened, and anybody who's an old school guy will remember Mt. Gox well. And all it takes is going on Wikipedia to read about it yourself. I remember who started Mt. Gox? Jed McCaleb? Who started XR? Who started Ripple? Who started Stellar, which is off of Ripple and XRP? Jed McCaleb? Interesting. Same guy. What about the accountability part? Remember how Mt. Gox had no accountability? The purpose that they were centralizing all the assets? Now, in his defense, he had sold Mt. Gox at this time to someone else, okay? In his defense. He may be I'm not accusing him, but they still were centralizing all the assets. Now what about XRP, Stellar, and this blockchain they call Ripple? Wasn't that just a pre-mine where they pre-mined every single coin? Well, pre-mined all these coins and all the guys in the beginning. They took a bunch of them. And now the others. Is there accountability? Can we track exactly every single transaction that's going on? We're able to track and see how many transactions they're doing and have a public ledger? No, I don't believe so. I don't believe there's no accountability. There's no actual true public digital ledger where we can always have a permanent receipt for our transactions on Ripple. So what can we learn as history repeats itself? I mean, looks like the same guy that started Mt. Gox has now started this other thing. All right. And I'm not a chart guy, a price or trading guy. So you need to look at trading people and price and speculation and all that. Talk to somebody else about that because that's not me. But when it comes to the actual infrastructure, the fundamentals, and like the building of these organizations, I can understand that. And so by this guy doing it, doesn't that raise a red flag? Really, why people should care about it is ultimately we, the people, get to take care of ourselves, our own independence, our own sovereign money with Bitcoin. Because when you have Bitcoin, again, the original Bitcoin, not this masquerading Bitcoin that cost, all this money to $30,000, $40,000 and all this money to transact in. That's for speculation. That's for traders. That's for something else. I'm talking about peer-to-peer cash Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. When we have that, we have our own sovereign money, our own way to transact with each other. We don't need another system. Let's say FedNow, CBDCs, whatever the next greatest thing is going to be coming out is. And I'm not saying there isn't other ways to do it, gold, silver, and other ways to have assets. I mean, absolutely. But by having our own way to transact with each other, at great distances in cash, because that's what Bitcoin is. It's just electronic cash with no middleman. We now have control of our own future and our own destiny. We are empowered. We don't need anyone else. Think about it. If we're not relying on a central system to transact, to print money, to give us our allotment and track everything that we do, we're not dependent on that. If they do that, well, we don't have control. We could vote and we can lobby our legislature. We can call Congress and get in touch with our elected officials, but we don't have the choice as to ultimately what happens with that. But we do have the choice of how to control our own sovereign money. All right? And even if inflation comes on United States dollars and it doesn't stop, it's a runaway inflation like Cliff High would talk about in his Alta reports for years, if you haven't read them. If that does come, we still have our own sovereign money to transact in, which is Bitcoin, the original Bitcoin. How we control, we take away power. The people get to have power. And this is like the real secret as to why they want to attack the David in this story, which is Satoshi. David being a Satoshi character. Why they want to destroy him so bad and discredit him. Because this infrastructure, it takes away their power through accountability, through a public ledger, and a peer-to-peer electronic cash system for the people to transact in. So, just food for thought. Like, comment, subscribe. This is Gavin Mehl. It's an important time exciting time to freaking be alive with this, man. People who get their head around this Bitcoin, the very few people who will, because of the entire charade, the masquerade that's been created about this cryptocurrency industry and the distractions, the Jed McCalebs of the world. I don't know him. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he's sitting with over $1 billion in the Ripple Foundation. And God rest him. God bless him. I hope it works well for him. But what about everybody else? Is that really where we want to put our faith in, invest into a centralized organization with no accountability? I mean, hey, if you don't mind risks, if you're not risk adverse, that's great, But all I'm saying is everybody should have at least one freaking Bitcoin, one Bitcoin. And if you do, be sure to send me one Bitcoin when you freaking finally take the plunge, when you find out how to do it, because it's not easy to buy. It's not easy to find, but it's Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. It's not on exchanges. It's hard to get. I'm sure if you do the research, there's a way to do it. And then I'll put my Handcash link in the link here. It's at gavinmehl or at handcash.io. And I'll put it in there. You send me a freaking Bitcoin Satoshi Vision when you freaking finally take the plunge and subscribe to this channel. And, I'll start doing a consulting service as well in this to offer people value, because there's so much to learn, and I can help shortcut you on all this information that I've been down, seeing the entire thing, break apart in 2017 and 2016 with Ethereum, and then the 2013 Mt. Gox debacle, this entire thing. I mean, it's just, it's a long rabbit hole to go down. And if you're new to it, it can be very confusing. So I'll see you next time, bro. Actually, as Zig Ziglar would say, I will see you at the top.